Hello, welcome back to A View from Mulberry Street with Matthew J. Mary. Here I am, and on this show we like to bounce around from topic to topic. Nothing is ever going to be in a very neat package, but I think today I'd like to talk about one of my most famous cases, probably the biggest case I had in my life in terms of what was on the line. It's the case of the United States against Thomas Pitera. And that was the first federal death penalty case in the state of New York. And Tommy Pitera was arrested with maybe 27 people, but they had to try him alone because he was the only person in the group that was facing the death penalty. And indeed, it was a very big deal. It was a big deal in the field of criminal law. It was a big deal down at the Eastern District of New York Federal Courthouse. It was a big deal in the news media. And certainly, it was a big deal to Tommy. You know, Tommy had been a subject of various law enforcement agencies for a very long period of time. He was being investigated by the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the NYPD, New York City Police Department. And some of the people in the New York City Police Department seemed to be devoting their life to taking Tommy Karate down. In any event, we're going to go back and forth. We're going to go back to the day of his arrest, which I believe was June 3rd or 4th, 1990. Quite a day for me. Let me go through that first. As a lawyer, you know, I am probably well known because of my organized crime cases, but I take a lot of other cases too, and I take not only federal cases, but state cases. I travel all around New York State, and when I was younger, not so much today, I used to travel all around the country. Maybe we'll get to that later, or in a future broadcast when we're just talking about general experiences as a lawyer. But on that day, June 3rd, 1990, I was representing a young man who was one of the defendants in the very famous Bensonhurst case. The Bensonhurst case concerned the murder of a young black man by the name of Yusuf Hawkins, and it dominated the news media in New York City for months and months and months and months. And my client was one of many young men accused of murder, kind of a conspiracy to murder. And even though only one person shot and killed Yusuf Hawkins, and even though the one person who was accused of that was convicted and got 25 years to life, the political climate as it was, led by the Reverend Al Sharpton, demanded that the prosecutors, the special prosecutors that were appointed, arrest everybody that was at the scene that day. And that included my client. That case went to trial. I tried that case along with the famous lawyer Jacob Evzeroff, the legendary Jack Evzeroff. And he and I went on to try at least 3 or 4 cases together. And I could tell you I fondly remember him as not only a brilliant lawyer, but a really great guy to be around. I had a lot of fun with Jack Evzeroff. Anyhow, because of the politically charged climate around the Bensonhurst case, on that day, I was leaving the New York State Criminal Court building, and there's quite a large group of protesters outside, most of them African Americans, who were protesting the case in general, that, this young man had been murdered. No question about it. My client didn't murder him, but, it was a serious political situation in the city. It was charged, racially charged, and a lot of violence concerning the surroundings of the case. In fact, when I left court that morning, there was a large group of people that were pelting me and the other lawyers with all sorts of objects. I don't know whether it was rocks, cans, all sorts of debris. And the court officers had to make a line on two sides of the street with court officers. There were umbrellas over us to shield us from the debris that was being thrown at us. And the court officers very bravely escorted me and the other lawyers to our individual cars. And it was like kind of dangerous. Anyhow, on that date, June 3rd, 1990, I proceeded to the Queens County Supreme Court, the one located in Long Island City. Quite a different crowd was waiting for me that day. The crowd also consisted of maybe 100 African Americans, but instead of pelting me with rocks and cans and debris, they were cheering me. It was like a hero that day, because at that particular courthouse, I was representing an African American man who was a union leader and who was being accused by the prosecution of crimes relating to the construction industry. And so here I was within a matter of hours, first being pelted with all sorts of flying objects, and now I'm the hero of a cheering crowd. And I said to myself way back then, wow, this is really an interesting job. But it got a lot more interesting for me later on in the day when I got a call from another attorney, a dear friend of mine, Charles Emma. And Charles Emma advised me that Thomas Pitera had been arrested for multiple murders, 9 murders, and numerous other crimes involving narcotics, involving machine guns, involving silencers, and all capital level cases, and cases where he is facing life without parole, death penalty, 30 years in prison. It was a huge case. And Mr. Emma advised me that he, who is a very personal friend of Thomas Pitera, and Mr. Pitera, had decided that they want me to take over the case and to represent Tommy. Tommy was known in the media and was referred to by the government, and it was his nickname. Thomas Pitera was known as Tommy Karate, or TK. And the government portrayed Tommy as a madman. His case had all the ingredients of a government mishmash soup. And it was all about, according to the government, the mafia, murder, mayhem, including a private burial ground on South Street in Staten Island, right off the Staten Island Expressway. And that so-called burial ground was explored by law enforcement for months and months and months. They were digging on the wrong side of the street, and it took them about 6 months before they came up with any evidence. In any event, the pretrial preparation for the Tommy Karate case took me 2 years. I had known Tommy and his father a long time before this situation occurred. In fact, Tommy knew that he was being investigated for a very long time, and he used to call me quite often to report various encounters that he would have with law enforcement. And on one particular day, Tommy arrived unannounced at my house in Brooklyn, and he told me, he said, Matt, he said, the FBI, the DEA, and NYPD are all following me today, and they're all running into each other. My first thought about that was that Tommy is a little paranoid. But lo and behold, 2 years later, at the trial of Tommy Karate, agents for the FBI, for the DEA, and the NYPD all testified that on that day that Tommy came to my house to tell me he was being followed, they all were in fact following him, and it was the first time that these three agencies realized that all three of them were trying to build a case against Thomas Pitera. And that started off a joint cooperative venture between the Drug Enforcement Agency, the FBI, and NYPD. Anyhow, let me interject. A lot of people think that Tommy Karate is some kind of madman or some kind of psychopath. I have to say that not only did I find him to be always respectful, not only of me, but of everybody he came into contact with. I never saw Tommy lose his temper. I never saw him become angry. And I was around him quite a bit prior to his arrest. And he always respected women, very especially. And he had a great love for animals, especially dogs. So Tommy was a guy who, when I first met him, he had just come back from Japan, where he was actually instructing members of the United States Army in the art of self-defense, jiu-jitsu, and karate. I kind of wish that Tommy had joined the military, because he would have made quite a commando, believe me. In fact, at one point in time during the course of Tommy's case, when we were having all the trouble finding Saddam Hussein, Tommy volunteered to me that he would serve the government in one capacity only, that if they wished, he would find Saddam Hussein and bring him to immediate justice. The government refused that offer. But anyhow, Tommy was a guy that I knew and that I liked. And going back to that day, the day that he came to my house, I was very busy that day, and I had to go to the post office. And my little daughter, who was then 3 years old and is now 35, I needed someone to babysit for her while I took care of a few chores. And I asked Tommy if he would mind babysitting for my daughter, and he said yes. And I could tell you without any reservation that I had no problem with Tommy babysitting for my little daughter. And I knew that she was in good hands. And indeed, she was very happy while he was babysitting for her. He entertained her. And, that's just the side of Tommy Karate that I saw so much. During the course of preparing for his case, once the death penalty charges were approved by Washington, D.C., as they have to be, the judge on the case, Rena Raji, a very famous judge, she, pursuant to law, appointed 3 lawyers, 2 death penalty specialists, to assist me in the Tommy Karate case. And one of them, I have to mention his name, David Runke, Ruhnke. He was the most magnificent, well-rounded, complete lawyers that you could ever meet. I mean, he was a lawman. He knew everything about the death penalty. He was an appellate lawyer and also a great trial lawyer. And having him on the case was an amazing asset, because way back in 1990, I can tell you that I did not even own a personal computer. I did not own like a desktop computer. I had no idea of what it was all about. And at that time, David Runke, his office was well equipped with every kind of computer equipment known to mankind. He was able to download and upload Discovery, crisscross it with each other, and keep a record of everything in this voluminous case that the government tossed at us. I could tell you there was one point in time when I was alone on the case and sitting in my office, kind of head in hand, looking at least 25 boxes of Discovery material, paperwork. Back in those days, they gave you real paper, and it was piled up all around my office. So when we got David Runke on our team, it was a really, really big change in the way we were able to fight the case. And fighting the case required me to visit Tommy at least twice a week for about 2 years prior to the trial. And I could tell you that those sessions weren't easy. Tommy was the greatest client that you could ever want to have. He was very respectful, never out of line. But he was well read. He read every bit of Discovery, thousands and thousands of pages, tens of thousands of pages of Discovery, and he had a comment on every page. He was part of his case, very informed, and wanted to participate for sure. So being involved in the Tommy Karate case was a great and stressful experience for me. But, one thing I learned during the course of that case, Tommy was facing the death penalty. There were 3 murders that carried a death penalty sentence. But yet, we always seemed to want to have fun. And there was a lot of bantering that went back and forth at the courthouse. Every morning before the judge would take the bench, we would always have a little session with the prosecutors on the case. And at that time, Tommy, he used to like to talk to the assistant U.S. attorney on the case, David Shapiro. And Tommy liked to kid around with David. And one day Tommy said to him, "Dave, why do you want me dead? Why do you want me dead?" And, Dave Shapiro said, "Listen, Tommy, I don't want you dead. I just want to bring you to justice for all the murders you've committed." And at that point, they had indicted him for 9 murders and had boasted to Tommy that they were investigating him for 37 others. Well, anyhow, Tommy said to Dave Shapiro, to the prosecutor in the case, "Listen, Dave, you're a nice guy. How about we make a deal?" And Dave said, "I don't want to make any kind of a deal with you, Tommy." And Tommy said, "Well, this is a good deal." He said, if I win the case, if I'm found not guilty on all charges, what I want to do is I want to take you out and buy you a beer and, have a night out on the town. And if you win, and if I have to get the death penalty, then I would like I'll give you the opportunity to personally come to my cell. Of course, I will be in chains, hands and feet, and I will allow you to personally shoot me between the eyes, because it seems like you really are anxious to see me dead. And, we all kind of laughed, and the prosecutor said to Tommy, "First of all, it's not my job to shoot you in the head. And if you are convicted, and if you receive the death penalty, you will die by a lethal injection." Well, that started off another series of more than banter, because Tommy is very upset at the idea of being killed by the government with a lethal injection. In fact, Tommy said right there on the spot, I think in front of the prosecutor, he said, "That's how That's what a vet does when you put an animal down. And Tommy said, I refuse to die like that if I'm convicted. He said, I want to face a firing squad. And, it went back and forth. Of course, the prosecutor told Tommy, I've got no control over that and how you will die if you are convicted. But it's something that it leaked out into the papers, that Tommy wanted to be executed by a firing squad. Well, the truth was Tommy didn't want to be executed at all. And in spite of the fact that all these legal organizations wanted to help us with the death penalty aspect of the case, Tommy wasn't very concerned with the death penalty at all. He was concerned with, quote, beating the case. And I have to say that all the death penalty lawyers that were assigned to the case, David Runke and Cheryl Mackle and Robert Fogelnest, all of them understood that if they were going to be on our team, that their primary goal was not to prevent the death penalty, but to win the case. And we did fight a valiant effort to win that case. And indeed, when all was said and done, the Tommy Karate trial is just a little too complex to go into on this podcast or any podcast. If it were a movie, it would be too long to show in the theaters. But it was a marathon legal adventure. And at the end of it, when the verdict came in, I'm the only lawyer in the world, I think, who has won 3 murder cases on the same day. But unfortunately, I lost 6 on the same day. Tommy had been accused of 9 murders and other crimes, and he was acquitted of 3 of those murders in some fantastic fashion, by the way. We may get to that later or on another broadcast, but anyhow, a loss is a loss no matter what. And the lawyers, obviously, when the verdict came in, all of us were no doubt, hanging our heads a bit. And Tommy responded by turning to the lawyers and saying to us, listen, hold your head up high. You're batting .333. You won 3 out of 9 murders. Congratulate yourself. And only Tommy could have that kind of positive attitude in the midst of this, terrible defeat and facing the death penalty. Tommy was unmoved. I mean, the smile on his face never disappeared. And there was a second phase of the trial called the death penalty phase. And Tommy wanted us, the lawyers, to waive that phase of the trial, to agree to the death penalty. And his logic wasn't illogical. His logic was that if he were facing life without parole, the appellate judges would probably ignore his appeal. But he felt that if he were the first person facing the death penalty in our district, that the appellate judges would pay close attention to his appellate issues. And I understood Tommy's logic, but I was able to persuade him not to do that and begged him to let us go forward with the death penalty phase, because I told him other lawyers would mock me if I allowed him to do that I just couldn't allow him to accept the death penalty. And so we went forward on the death penalty phase, and we won that part of it. The jury decided that Tommy should not get the death penalty. But unfortunately, the sentence of the court then had to be life without parole. And so, going back over the Tommy Karate trial, I guess there is a lot for the legal pundits to talk about forever. But what I remember the most about that first federal death penalty case was how much fun we tried to have. And I mean, Tommy himself was like the ringmaster of laughter during the course of the trial. You know, one day he actually accused a female prosecutor of dressing provocatively in order to try to seduce him. And Tommy insisted that I bring it to the attention of the judge, and I kind of reluctantly did so. And much to my surprise, the judge said to the prosecutor, "Well, Miss So-and-so, I don't agree that you're trying to seduce anyone, but perhaps you should dress a little bit differently when you come to court." And wow, was Tommy overwhelmingly happy with that. Little victories, right? Tommy was beaming from ear to ear. And he said to me, "Matt," he said, "you don't understand." He said, "You have to bring up these important issues." And there are a lot of issues that many lawyers would think were frivolous, but Tommy insisted that they be brought up. And so they were. You know, when you're talking about a guy like Tommy Karate, and when you're talking about a case like United States against Banter, remember, I had already been in the commission case, which is probably the biggest case of all time. But being the lead counsel on the Tommy Pitera case, believe me, that was quite a challenge. And when I first started in that case, unlike the commission case, where there were 12 lawyers, all of them my senior, when I started with the Tommy Karate case, I was all alone. And, you know, it was a blessing in disguise that the government decided. They decided to bring a death penalty case. And that requires a trip to Washington to try to fight it out. You know, 2 other times in my life, the defendants will remain anonymous for now, but 2 other times in my life, I went to Washington when my clients were charged with federal death penalty charges. And I was able to convince a committee of assistant United States attorneys, assistant attorney generals of the United States, not to bring the death penalty charges against my client. In the case of Tommy Pitera, they seemed gung-ho to do it. It was the first federal death penalty case, and quite frankly, he was the kind of character that the government wanted for that first case. And indeed, the prosecutor, when we're at the death penalty phase of the case, he said to the jury, "You know, if Tommy Karate doesn't deserve to die, then who does?" And Tommy got a big kick out of that. You know, he started to laugh, and I told Tommy, "Please, don't laugh. You can't laugh. The jurors will be angry with you." But the jurors, I think the jurors did the right thing, because one thing you have to remember about the Tommy Karate case, and many years later, I was at a dinner. I was on the dais. I don't know if it was the Al Smith dinner or Colombian lawyers or one of the, in those days, I was part of so many organizations. I was the president of the Catholic Lawyers. I was on the board of directors of the New York County Lawyers. I was the vice president of the New York Criminal Lawyers. I was on the board of directors of so many organizations. I would go to dinners at least 2 or 3 times a week. And anyhow, I wound up on the dais next to Rena Raji, and she asked, "How's Tommy doing?" And I said, "You know, Tommy's doing okay. He still calls me all the time." But, you know, we got talking about the case, and I had to say to her that I thought that her charge to the jury in the death penalty phase of the case was very, very fair. And one of the things that she said at the trial to the jury was, you have to remember that the people who were killed here were not a bunch of first graders. And I could do a whole podcast just talking about the so-called victims. So let's be clear. To this very moment, right at this moment, Tommy Pitera is still fighting to get out of jail. Tommy Pitera still proclaims his innocence. And I'll never say anything contrary to that because I want Tommy to get out, okay? But, most people believe that he was guilty. The jury found him guilty. And you have to wonder. I said to the judge, Tommy's not guilty. But if he were guilty, who's around now to take care of the bad guys? Because let me tell you, the people that Tommy was accused of killing were really bad, okay? One guy had defrauded everyone in Tommy's neighborhood with regard to some Persian rugs. And when Tommy found out about it, he decided that he was going to collect all the Persian rugs from the people in the neighborhood and then go to the guy who sold these fraudulent rugs, these phony rugs. He would go to the guy and say to the guy, you've got to reimburse the people. Well, when Tommy eventually meets this person, returns all the rugs, tells this person, you've got to give the money back. The guy looks Tommy in the eye and said to him, caveat emptor. That means let the buyer beware. It's a legal term. Tommy didn't quite understand what that meant, but he understood that it meant the guy wasn't going to give the money back. And then the guy said, Tommy said, well, I'm telling you, you're going to have to give the money back. I've laid out the money and you're going to have to pay me. And so according to the witness against Tommy, I don't know if this happened. I don't know if any of this happened. But according to the main witness against Tommy, the government's witness, he said that Tommy told the guy, listen, do you know who I am? And the guy said, yes, I know who you are. And Tommy said, well, who am I? And the guy said, you're Tommy Karate, and F you. And Tommy said to the guy, according to the witness, Tommy said to the guy, you know who I am, and you still tell me F you? And the guy said, yeah. Well, let's just put it this way. That fellow wound up with his throat slit from here to here, and his head dangling off his body by a thread. And the witness against Tommy said that Tommy did that. And Tommy says that the witness against him was the person who cut this guy from ear to ear, letting his head dangle from a string from his body. Well, that was typical of the 9 people that Tommy was accused of killing in his trial. And, he was acquitted of 3 murders, including the murder of Willie Boy Johnson. And as you may remember from my last episode, one of my other episodes concerning John Gotti, you remember that the government told the agents, told Tommy Pitera, hey, Tommy, we got you on 9 murders. We're investigating you for 37 more. How would you like to walk? All you have to do is give us John Gotti. And Tommy responded in a very negative way to them. All right, they didn't like it. They beat the damn heck out of him again. Okay, but that was fine because that's the way Tommy liked it. That's the way he operated. But why I'm bringing that up is that this Willie Boy Johnson murder, that was one of the murders that Tommy Pitera was acquitted of. And I could tell you, when that acquittal came in on the Willie Boy Johnson murder, Tommy was grinning from ear to ear, and he couldn't stop thanking his lawyers. He was just so happy with that verdict. And that's just the kind of guy that Tommy was. Before, we were talking about some of the funny things that happened during the course of the case, and I told you that Tommy wanted me to accuse the female prosecutor of trying to seduce him. Well, anyhow, during the course of the case, Tommy leaned over to me, and he said that he thought that Judge Raji, who happened to be a beautiful woman, he said, Matt, I think that she likes me, meaning like she liked him romantically or whatever. And I leaned over to Tommy, and I said, well, Tom, I don't think she really likes you like that. I think that she would like to kill you." And he laughed. Tommy had a great, great, great sense of humor. He was always beaming all the time. And only once did he get really, really upset. And that's because I told you before that he was diligent in reading all of the discovery material in the case, maybe 100,000, 200,000 pages. And he liked to make notes, but they wouldn't allow him to have a pen. And they certainly wouldn't allow him to have a pencil. And because of that, when Tommy would write notes to his lawyers, he would have to write his notes, his client notes to his attorneys, in crayon, because they would give him a crayon. And I asked the prosecutors and the officials at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan, which is now closed. Tommy served all his time up there in what they call 9 South. That's like the special section where, like, they keep you like an animal and treat you like an animal in 9 South at the MCC. And I said to the officials, "But why can't Tommy have a pencil? Please, I need to get his notes." And they said to me, "Counselor, you haven't done your homework, because obviously you don't know that a sharpened number 2 pencil is one of Tommy's favorite weapons." And I couldn't believe that. Next time I saw Tommy, I told him about that, and all he did was laugh, and he grinned from ear to ear. What a sense of humor. And one last story about Tommy, for now. In this podcast, we're not putting anything into a neat package and wrap it up and say that's the Tommy Karate case. Oh, that's John Gotti. We'll be talking about everybody over and over again. We're going to mix things up a lot, because this is just like kind of a memoir, my side of the street, where I see things from, the other side of the story, the opposite of what the government dishes out, the opposite of what the media pours out to the public like poison. But anyhow, at the end of the Tommy Karate trial, it was time for him to be sentenced. And the judge sentenced him for each of the 6 murders that he was convicted of. Of course, he could not get the death penalty because we won that. We beat the death penalty phase of the case. And so the judge was able to sentence him to 6 consecutive life sentences. That means one after the other, which prompted me to ask the judge, "Judge, do you believe in life after death?" And everybody kind of laughed at that, because how could you sentence a man to life consecutively 6 times? She also, life times 6 plus 30 years. And finally, when she was all finished, nothing fazed Tommy. He just stood there like a man, not smiling, not mocking the judge, not being angry. He just stood there, like attention, like a soldier. And it came to the final part of his sentence, when the judge said, "And now I'm going to cumulatively sentence you to all the fines on all of these various charges." There was charges of silencers and gun after gun after gun. It was just an enormous amount of time. And she said, "I'm sentencing you to a grand total of $4 million. And then Tommy looked up to the judge very respectfully with a big smile. And he said, "I ain't paying." And everyone in the court cracked up, including the judge, who had to hold her hands in front of her face so that we wouldn't see she was laughing too. So Tommy went from beginning to end in this saga, always with a smile on his face, never crying, never complaining, never being a difficult client, but just being a man's man. And when I write to Tommy, on Easter time and Christmas time and on his birthday, I always say, to a man's man, a man second to none.